How's the 9:30 service doing? Awake? Wait, I know everybody's tired this morning, and so I wanted to start with a joke. And the joke is this: which bank does the sun go to? Well, it's the Daylight Savings Bank, right? Yeah. All right. Hey, it is great to be together. Well done starting the service, Todd. Jeez. If you're watching online, I'm glad you've joined us. If you're new today, maybe today's your first day, I'm glad you're here. My name's Todd. And listen, before we get into the sermon content, I want to give you just a quick update. Caitlin this morning introduced kind of Easter coming up and the 4 services that we're going to host here, which we're really excited about, because Easter and Christmas, we know that there's a lot of people that only come on Easter and Christmas, but we see that as an opportunity to reach more people for Jesus. And so we want you to be inviting your friends, your neighbors, your extended family members to come on Easter. And we want to ensure that everybody actually has a spot here in the services. So if you remember, if you were at Christmas time, the first 2 services at Christmas were so packed that we had 30 to 40 people in overflow sitting watching the service on a screen. Let me just tell you that. We don't like that. We don't want people in overflow. It is not the goal. And so this year, as we approach Easter, the goal is nobody in overflow. All right? Because it's just like getting all ready and dressed up for Easter, then watching it on a TV screen. You could do that at home. And so what we're going to do this year is introducing something new. We want you to RSVP for Easter. We want you to kind of reserve your spot for an Easter service. And because we think that we could balance out the services better, all for the purpose of maximizing our impact for Jesus. We know that everybody plans for Christmas and Easter, so usually well in advance you know which service you're going to go to. So we simply want you to pick one, tell us how many people are coming, and then you're going to see as the services fill up, you'll actually see, okay, that service is full, we're going to have to try a different service so that we can make sure we're balanced out and no one is in overflow, so everybody gets to experience what we have prepared for Easter. And this is all to maximize the impact for Christ that day. So be inviting your neighbors and pointing them to the RSVP. Sign up, say, I reserved your spot on the RSVP. And I think it'll be an exciting time. So thanks for doing that. Let me jump now back into our sermon series called The 40 Days with Jesus. We introduced last week this series with the 40-day digital fast. We had 1,000 folders last week that we had made with little weekly plans. We had 50 left after last week. So fantastic response. We didn't even have 950 people here in attendance last week. That means some of you took one for yourself and for somebody else, which is great. We're so glad you did. Now the hard part is actually following through on the digital fast. And hopefully it's been helping you. Share it with others. Keep each other accountable. And let's see how God might use it in our lives. All right, so this series, we're also going through the Gospel of Mark, looking at the life of Jesus. And so today we're going to do that exact thing. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at 3 scenes in the life of Jesus. And by looking at these 3 scenes, I want to start with really a big overarching question that I think all of us need to answer. And here's the question. For you, is Jesus popular or is Jesus personal? For you, is Jesus popular or is he actually personal? So if you have your Bibles, you can open them to Mark chapter 3. That's where the 3 scenes are going to be, verses 1 to 19. And our outline is actually going to be the 3 scenes. So here we go. 3 scenes starts with Jesus with the crowds. Scene 2, Jesus in the church. And then number 3, Jesus with the 12. Those are the 3 scenes today. So let's dive in together to the first scene, Jesus with the crowds. And before I read this scene to you, I actually want to set it up by telling you a little bit of a story. So my son, Griffin, he turns 14 today. If you see Griffin, make sure you give him a big happy birthday. I want to give as many hugs as possible to him. He loves hugs. But my boy Griffin pointed in this story is he loves sports. And I don't know where he gets it, but he loves sports. And he loves the Cavs, he loves the Browns, and he has this ability to memorize like so many like useless facts about players. You know, he knows so many things. Like he could name you the starting five for the like Portland Trailblazers, and I, you know, we're not even Trailblazers fans. It's kind of guy Griffin is. So you could take like a player like Donovan Mitchell on the Cavs. He loves the Cavs, and Griffin knows like his average points per game, average assists per game, knows his shoe size, knows his college, knows his hometown, probably knows his mom's name. Like test him today, all right? Because Griffin just has a lot of facts about players. But if he were to run into Donovan Mitchell on the street today, Donovan Mitchell would have no idea who Griffin is, right? Because Griffin knows a lot about Donovan Mitchell, but there's not actually a personal relationship there. And I think sometimes it can be the same way with Jesus, that we can be kind of fans of Jesus. We can know a lot about Jesus, but we haven't yet allowed Jesus to personally change our lives. So that's kind of where we're going here. Here's the scene. Mark chapter 3, starting at verse 7. It says, Jesus withdrew with his disciples to the sea, and a great crowd followed him from Galilee and Judea, and Jerusalem and Idumea, from beyond the Jordan, and from all around Tyre and Sidon. When the great crowd heard all that he was doing, they came to him, and he told his disciples to have a boat ready for him because of the crowd, lest they crush him. For he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. And whenever the unclean spirits saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, "You are the Son of God." And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. All right. So by this time, Jesus is doing so many miracles that he's getting this amazing following. I mean, the crowds are pushing in on him. And if you read that all the places that the crowds are coming from, all over just to see Jesus. Like if they had social media back in that day, like his follows would be going through the roof. He would have that blue check mark by his name that he is indeed a public figure. Like Jesus, could have hired an agent at this point and started, going on tour and filling stadiums. He could have signed a book deal at this point. That's how big of a deal Jesus was becoming, but he didn't do any of that. As a matter of fact, what we read in this is he got away from the crowds. He got away from, there's a lot of reasons for that, I believe. But what I want you to see, kind of this overarching thing, is that Jesus never wanted to come to be popular with the crowds. He always wanted to come to be personal with individuals like you and me. Like, Jesus didn't come to kind of put on this like healing show so that people would come from all over the place just to be healed. Jesus came for a purpose, and that was to come to lay down his life to give us the greatest healing that anyone could ever ask for, which is inner spiritual healing, the forgiveness and grace that comes through what he did for us. He came not for the crowds, but for the individuals, for you and me. And here's kind of my point that I want to make. It is possible that you could be filling out a survey and check the box, Christian. It's possible that you wear a cross around your neck and you attend church every single Sunday, but yet you have not been transformed personally by a relationship with Jesus. And until you do, you're not going to experience all that Jesus has to offer. Because here's what I believe is true, that Jesus isn't interested he's not interested in popularity. He's interested in being personal to you. Like for Jesus, you are not just a face in the crowd. You are somebody he knows and wants to transform by his grace and by his power. All right, so that's a great segue, though, into the next scene. Scene 2 is Jesus and the church. And by the way, all these scenes are different, but they kind of all fit together, hopefully. If you don't think they do, just tell me, and next time I won't do this. All right, so number 2 is Jesus and the church. It's the section right before the one we just read, if you're following in your Bible. Mark chapter 3, starting at verse 1. It says, "Again, he entered the synagogue, and a man was there with a withered hand. And they watched Jesus to see whether he would heal him on the Sabbaths, so that they might accuse him. You see, it was against the religious laws to heal on the Sabbath. And he said to the man with the withered hand, "Come here." And he said to them, "Is it lawful on the Sabbath to do good or to do harm, to save life or to kill?" But they were silent. And he looked around at them with anger, grieved at their hardness of heart, and said to the man, "Stretch out your hand." He stretched it out, and his hand was restored. The Pharisees then went out and immediately held counsel with the Herodians against him, how to destroy him. All right, interesting scene here. Jesus is healing a man with a withered hand, but he's doing it in an unlikely place. A lot of times when Jesus heals people, he does it kind of interpersonally, but he is actually in the synagogue, if you read that, on the Sabbath, healing this. That's like if we were to say he healed somebody in church on a Sunday. He was healing him in front of a whole bunch of people. And that's what you kind of see in this passage. And the whole purpose of me saying this is, I think what you see in this scene is what Jesus would be focused on if he showed up here at church today. And let me kind of give you a little bit of background now about the man with the withered hand. The man with the withered hand, most likely his hand was withered because of some sort of paralysis that he had experienced. Maybe it was from birth, maybe it's something had happened to him that made it that way. But if you had a disability like that back in the day, you were kind of an outcast. Like you couldn't typically do as much, you couldn't provide for your family, so you were kind of on the outs back in that day. And not only that, but it was worse in the church. Because in the church, if you had a disability, you were considered not even welcome in the church because you very obviously must have done something wrong in your life in order to get that disability. That's kind of what they believed. It was a result of some sin that they did. So you weren't welcome in the church because you were a very obvious and clear sinner to people in the church. And so that's why the religious leaders are kind of already bothered and mad that this is even going on inside of the church. And that's what we see here. Now, the religious leaders are frustrated with Jesus, and the reason they're frustrated with Jesus is because he is breaking the law on the Sabbath. But the reason they're doing that is because they are more interested in Jesus and the people in church following the rules than somebody who really needs healing to actually experience healing from their brokenness. They have the complete wrong perspective on what happens in church. And that's what I want you to see here is that the reason this scene is so powerful is because Jesus tells the religious leaders in church that you don't even know the point of church. The point of church is that you come and you bring your brokenness, you bring your sin, you bring your struggles because you can be healed. You know, church is not about a place to make sure you're following the rules. It's about actually bringing the issues that you're going through that you can experience healing from that. And I think the religious leaders had it all wrong. It kind of begs the question, what did they think the point of church was? And I think if I were to get in their heads, I think what they thought church was is a place that they would show up and everything that happened would just make themselves feel better about the way they're living. Like, just tell me I'm okay. Make sure I'm checking all the boxes and following the rules. They came to church to feel better about themselves, but the man with the withered hand, he came to church to be healed. And I guess my challenge to us today is, why do you come to church? Why do you come to church? Do you come just to feel a little bit better about yourself for the week ahead, to justify the way that you're living your life right now? Or do you come to church to actually bring your sin and bring your struggle and receive healing? Because I think that's way more of what Jesus would do if he was right here today. Jesus would prioritize you. If you are struggling with sin or you are broken in some way today, Jesus would actually look straight at you and he would say the same thing that he said to the man with the withered hand. He said, "Come here." And then he'd say, "Stretch out your hand. Stretch out your hand." And it's a little different. Obviously, your hand isn't withered, But there's a spiritual truth to this. And there was something powerful about what happened with this man. When Jesus said, come, he came. And then when Jesus said, stretch out his hand, he stretched out his hand. There were two things that we see here. First of all, the man wanted to change. He wanted to be healed. Second, he trusted that Jesus could do it for him, right? Those are the two. And I want you to, that's the same things that you could do today. Do you want to change? Is there an area of your life that you really want to change? You got to want it first, but then you need to bring it to Jesus, surrender it to Jesus, and allow him to change you, because that's what he wants to do. That's why I guess my challenge today is, if you're here and you're struggling with a particular sin, or maybe there's been something in your life that has had a hold on you for a long time, you are in exactly the right place to find healing. Because Jesus came into church and said, this is a place for broken people to be healed, not for righteous people to make sure they're righteous. And so bring it to Jesus today and trust him that he could heal you. That leads me to the next scene, and the last scene, which is Jesus with the 12. Again, a very different scene. But Jesus gets away from the crowds now to get with individuals. So listen to this. Verse 10. And he went up on the mountain and called to him those whom he desired. And they came to him. And he appointed 12, whom he also named apostles, so that they might be with him and he might send them out to preach and have authority to cast out demons. He appointed the 12, Simon, to whom he gave the name Peter, James, the son of Zebedee, and John, the brother of James, to whom he gave the name, and I don't even know how to pronounce that, I'm not even going to, but that is the sons of thunder. I can pronounce that. Andrew, and Philip, and Bartholomew, and Matthew, and Thomas, and James, the son of Alphaeus, and Thaddeus, and Simon the Zealot, and Judas Iscariot, who betrayed him. Now, there is a lot here. This is the first time he's kind of calling these disciples. And it's more than, when he lists these guys' names, it's more than just naming. It's giving them this new identity. And I want to explain what I mean. There is a lot in names, right? Back in this day, your name was really huge for your identity. Your name told people something about who you really were. Names are really important. Names are still important, right? But maybe not exactly in the same way. But I'll tell you this, Jillian and I, when we were first having our kids, we were trying to think of names to name our kids. And the hard part for us was that I was serving as a student ministry pastor, overseeing like a really large middle school ministry with lots of kids. Middle schoolers, they're a work in progress. There's fantastic kids, but sometimes we would come up with a name and would be like, that's a great name, but we can't name our kid that because we know that kid. And let's just say it's not a wonderful association, right? Names, and that's what names do, is names actually they end up being closely tied to the kind of person you are. So that when someone thinks of your name, they think of like the kind of person you are, your identity. Another way to look at this is, it's why celebrities end up changing their names to match their persona. And so does anybody know who Stephanie Germanotta is? Man! Somebody peaked. Lady Gaga. How about anybody but Rocco can answer this one? How about the next one? Does anybody know who Calvin Broadus is? Snoop Dogg. And then lastly, Marion Robert Morrison. John Wayne. For some of you experienced people in life. But listen, these guys all changed their names to match their persona, because John Wayne's going like, Marion is not a rugged cowboy, that's, so And all kinds of celebrities do this because they want to give off the kind of identity that they want people to see about them. Now, with all that said, when Jesus is naming these disciples, when he's appointing them, he's doing something different. He's not just reading off their names, he's actually giving them the identity that he wants them to have, right? Not one that they make up for themselves, but one that only Jesus can actually give them. So listen to this, in Mark 3:14, it actually says, and he appointed 12. What I learned this week is that word appointed is not just like, I'm telling you who you are, but it actually is, the Greek word is more like the word you would use for created, like it's an artistic term, like you're making something. And so it's really interesting what Jesus is doing here is he's actually creating a new name for these disciples. He's creating a new identity for them that they don't have yet, but they are now in the process of getting. So what he did is he even renamed a couple of them. If you read closely, he took Simon and he renamed him Peter. Peter means, anybody know? Rock. Because later on he would say, Peter's going to be the rock that the church is built on. And then he took James and John. No longer were they the sons of Zebedee. They were now the sons of thunder, which I think is like a WWE duo that it's going to body slam somebody. But these new names, they didn't earn these names. Jesus said, no, this is who you're going to be because of me, which I think is amazing. Now, let's look at Peter as a case study. Peter was named Peter because it means rock, and Jesus would later say, you're Peter, you're the rock on which the church is going to be built. But if you look at Peter's life, he was anything but a rock. Peter struggled. He was kind of a loose cannon. He was real emotional. He would say things he regretted all the time. And then finally, when it came down to Jesus about to die, he denied he even knew Jesus 3 times. Peter was kind of a mess and anything but a rock. And yet what happened, right, is Jesus died and rose from the dead, and Peter witnessed this. And it began to change everything for Peter, and he began to lean into this new identity that Jesus wanted to give him and told him he would have. Now the question is what made the difference for Peter? And I think there's a couple things that made the difference. First of all, back in verse 14, it says, and he appointed 12 so that they might be with him. Jesus got personal with people because he wanted them to be with him. And what we see here is Jesus was personal to Peter. He wasn't popular. He wasn't a part of the crowd. He really knew Jesus. He spent 3 years following Jesus so that he began to learn how to trust Jesus. But then this is what made all the difference. The next thing is this. Peter actually witnessed the death of Jesus, mourned it, and then watched Jesus raised to new life and then ascend into heaven. That point, Peter was not just somebody that Jesus was a friend of. Jesus wasn't just a personal friend to Peter. Now he was a personal friend who also had the authority over death. He was a personal friend that actually now rose from the dead and was the God of the universe. And so when Jesus sits Peter down after the resurrection and he goes, hey, you're Peter, and I want you to feed my sheep. You're the rock on which the church is built. Peter goes, I think that's going to happen. And it wasn't because Peter was powerful in and of itself. It's because Peter knew that Jesus, when he says something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And so Peter leaned into this thing because Jesus was in him and working through him. And he literally did become the first person to deliver the first sermon, and the church took off from there, right? And so what the kind of the truth that I want you all to see this morning is this, that because of Jesus, you have a Savior that has laid down his life for you. He wants to heal you from your sin, right? But then he also wants to create in you this brand new identity. The things that used to define you don't need to define you anymore. Now you have something brand new that you can lean completely into. You know, Ephesians 2:8 through 10 says this. Oh, before I get there, sorry, take that off real quick. This is what that means for us. This is really important. You might go, yeah, I'm weak. I'm weak in my faith. Jesus says, no. You're strong. I'm making you strong. You could go, I'm gripped by anxiety and fear. And Jesus is like, nope, that's the old you. You are courageous. So lean into the courage that I'm going to give you because of what I've done. You could be riddled by bad decisions in your past. You could be deep in the shame of all you've done, and you just go, you don't understand all the things I've done in my past. I am so broken. And Jesus says, nope, you're whole. You are new. That's gone. That's what Jesus is doing. He's creating in you as a follower of Jesus this brand new identity that you can begin to lean into. And as you get more personal with Jesus and get to know him better and better and better, you lean more into that identity and you just go through the roof. And I have to tell you, this is happening at this church. This week, I spent time with people where this is happening. They are getting rid of sin and healing their sin, and they are moving towards this new identity. And it's so exciting to see. Back to Ephesians 2:8 through 10. For by grace you have been saved through faith, and this is not of your own doing, it's the gift of God. Not a result of works, so that no one may boast. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand, that we should walk in them. So because of his grace, not only are we saved and forgiven of our sin and healed, but it says now we're his workmanship. And that word in the Greek is more like his work of art. He is creating in us a new identity with things that he wants us to do for him. We have purpose and belonging and identity now because of what Jesus has done. And so I want to go back to the question that I posed in the beginning to hopefully kind of tie everything together. For you, is Jesus popular or is Jesus personal? Are you interested in Jesus, and that's kind of why you're here, because you think, man, there's some really good things about Jesus. He's only good for the world. So I like talking about him. I like thinking about him. Or has he really become personal to you? And if he hasn't become personal to you yet, what I want you to see is all the ways these scenes tie together, right? That he wants to be personal. You're not just a face in the crowd. He wants to know you. He wants to call you by name. He wants you to bring your sin to him because he wants to forgive you and heal you. And then he wants to create in you a new identity that you could never create for yourself so that you can be changed completely by him. And I want to give you a story kind of as we wrap up. And the story is about somebody I know who's really experienced this whole transformation leaning into this new identity. And this particular guy that I know is a friend of mine, and he actually kind of grew up in a very broken home. And so the odds were already stacked against him early on. His dad wasn't really around very much. He was probably on his way to being a statistic until somebody kind of came into his life and decided that they were going to introduce him to Jesus. And this guy was searching the world over, doing all the things that high school students do. And late in high school, this guy introduced him to Jesus, and he finally found what he was looking for. And Jesus began to change everything. And as I've talked to this particular guy, I've asked him, what would people have characterized you? What would people have characterized you for? I don't even know how to say this sentence right now. How would people have viewed you back when you were in high school? And he's like, well, they would say I'm angry, I'm bitter, I'm prideful, and that led me to partying my brains out. It led me to pursuing girls and all this unhealthy stuff in my life. But because of Jesus, it's changed his whole identity. That guy is actually Pastor Brandon, who's one of our pastors, right? And it's an amazing story because if you were to talk to Brandon's high school friends, they would not recognize the 34-year-old version of Pastor Brandon. If you know him and you haven't had a chance to talk to him personally, he is not at all the same guy. Sometimes he looks like he wants to kill you, but it's just some people have that resting face. You benefit from what God has done in his life. He is brand new. He is the same Brandon Smith. And I know that there's probably, a bajillion other Brandon Smiths in the world, but he is a new creation in Christ. He is a new identity that has changed everything. And I think that's happened with so many of us. I think so many, as I look at faces, I see transformation. Some of you look back 10 years ago, you are not the same person that you were. You don't struggle with the same things you struggle with. And sometimes it's hard. Sometimes we revert back. But you are different. Like the people that knew you in college, would they look at you and go, I don't even recognize you anymore. That can't be you. That's all because of what Jesus has done for you. So what we're going to do as we close the service is something a little bit different. I believe it's really good to reflect on how Jesus has actually changed your life and some of the ways that he's actually done that. And so we're going to give you a chance to do that today as we close. And if you look in front of you, you're going to see little pieces of paper that are slipped inside the little slot there. Those are new slots for us. Go ahead and pull one of those out. You might have to share a pen. I'm not sure how many are in each one. But here's what we're going to do. On the front of the paper, it says, before I met Jesus, I was ... And before you get going writing, don't write yet, just listen. Before you get going writing, in a sentence or two, would you just tell us, or just write down, what would be some of the things that defined you before you met Jesus? Gripped by fear, anxiety. I was addicted. I was a terrible husband. I was a father that just didn't do what I should have done with my kids. What were the things that really defined you before Jesus? Just write a few things, reflect on it, write. And then what we're going to do is, then you turn it over. And I want you to write then, now that I know Jesus, I am. And some of the things that Jesus has done to change your life, this new identity that not only he wants to give you, but that he has given you. And write down the ways that you are changed because of Jesus. Now, this is, you could be completely anonymous or you can write your name, but we want to see all that God's doing in our midst. And so we're going to ask you at the end to just put it in the giving boxes that are in the back, just so that we can kind of see all that God is doing. All right, let me go ahead and pray. I'm going to give you a chance. Becca's going to just sing a song during this while you reflect. Father, thank you so much for what you've done through Jesus and that you are creating a new identity in us. Help us to look back and see how much you've done and how much you've changed us, so that we can be convinced that you will keep changing us, so that we can be encouraged by that. And I pray that if anybody really doesn't have that story yet, that maybe today is the day they would just turn their life over to Jesus for the first time. That maybe today is the day they would just say, you know what? I'm going to bring my sin and my struggle to Jesus. I want the healing and I want forgiveness and I want a new name. So Lord, I pray for that to happen as well. And would you give us just the ability to have wisdom as we reflect now in his name. Amen.
The hour is dark, and it's hard to see what you are doing here in the ruins and where it will lead. Oh, but I know that down through the years I'll look back on this moment and see your hand on it and know you were here. And I'll testify of the battles you've won, how you were my portion when there wasn't enough. I'll testify of the seas I've crossed, the waters you've parted, the waves that I've walked, singing, oh, my God didn't fail. Oh, it's the story I'll tell. Oh, I know it is well. Oh, it's the story I'll tell. Believing gets hard when options are few, when I can't see what you're doing. I know that you're proving you're the God who comes through. Oh, but I know that over the years I'll look back on this moment and see your hand on it and know you were here. And I'll testify of the battles you've won, and how you were my portion when there wasn't enough. I'll testify of the seas we've crossed, the waters you've parted, the waves that I've walked, singing, oh, my God did not fail. Oh, I know it all that's the story I'll tell. And I'll testify of the battles you won, how you were my portion when there wasn't enough. And I'll testify of the seas that we've crossed, the waters you parted, the waves that I've walked, singing, oh, my God didn't fail. Oh, it's the story